Welcome to Sitting with Sallie. Today I have with me Susan Evenden, who's off to Europe on the Battlefield Bike Riders as part of Wounded Warriors. There have been over 750 Battlefield Bike Riders over the years who've been raising money for Wounded Warriors. And you're going to talk about that, Susan, and welcome, but you must be very excited.
I am very excited, yes. Usually I'm nervous at this point about flying out, but I am really excited today.
And we were just talking before we went on air, but you're all packed and ready to go. And
all packed, ready to go. Just have to get the pedals off my bike and I'm ready to go.
And this is your last stop.
Yes, it is. Yeah, a little bit of work and then, out tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Yes.
Great. Tell me about Wounded Warriors.
Wounded Warriors, it started in 2014, some Bosnia and Herzegovina, I can never say that. I practiced before I came. And Afghan vets, recognizing the high rate of suicide of their friends, realized they had to do something. And so they started working, they did actually initially a bike ride with just a small group of actual veterans who had been in their units, and they found it quite therapeutic. So they decided to raise funds that they would do these battlefield bike rides, and they would open them up to, initially it was family and friends of veterans, and use that as a fundraiser to develop programs, unique programs designed to deal with PTSD for veterans. And that's how it started. Since that time, they recognized that the suicide rates amongst police, fire, and ambulance and 911 operators is extremely high. And so they've added those specialties into their programs.
And I don't know about the emergency services, but I know vets seem to have a 2 to 3 times higher suicide rate than the average public.
They do, yes. And largely I think that they don't talk about it, we don't ask, and so they carry this burden. And many of them can say things that just cause us to cringe a little, and we don't necessarily want to hang around with them.
I was going to say they have seen things and perhaps done things that we really don't want to know about.
That's right, yeah. And those that do say things usually say it as dark humor, which isn't very therapeutic. And we can't understand what they've gone through. And I don't think we really even want to, not really.
And while not everyone is suffering, but PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is a huge contributor, I imagine, to the mental problems.
Yes, PTSD, and they've added occupational stress injuries, and that is, instead of, say, one incident, I believe it is just the accumulation of trauma after trauma after trauma. And that's really where the police, fire, and ambulance get called in, is because they do that every day, little traumas that add up to a big trauma.
And I think you had told me earlier that Wounded Warriors had started elsewhere, perhaps in the States, United Kingdom, but it's been in Canada since 2014.
Yes.
It's a national program.
Yes, it is. It's different than what Wounded Warriors UK and Wounded Warriors USA does. We focus exclusively on PTSD.
And can you tell me what some of the programs are?
There's therapy programs for veterans. There are the therapy dogs. That's a huge program, getting therapy dogs out to veterans. There's programs for families, husbands, wives, because the stress on the partner is substantial. And they've added children's programs because children living in a home where PTSD is a reality have unique needs that their peers don't.
And they have a kid camp.
Yeah, kid camp, yeah. So these kids go away and they're taught skills to deal with the emotional aspects of their parents' trauma and how that affects the household as well.
So I know there's different programs, like you mentioned, for partners or spouses, but there's also couple programs.
Yes, and recently they have added the Surviving Spouse program, which is when suicide impacts a family, a program specifically designed for the surviving spouse.
And we won't get into the details, but I imagine a lot of the programs are helping build resilience back into people and coming to terms with what has happened.
Yes, resilience, coming to terms with it, being able to face it, being able to speak about it, addressing the trauma, the nightmares that go along with it, and coping skills for when a panic attack occurs, how to get through that. And that's a lot of what the therapy dogs,
I wanted to say, what do therapy dogs do? Because that's quite fascinating.
therapy dogs recognize when the partner, we'll call it, the human partner is experiencing stress, and they will move in, brush against the leg, perhaps encourage an interaction, some calming behavior that works for their particular partner.
Yeah. I think we all need therapy dogs at times.
At times, yeah. Pets are therapeutic.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And the Wounded Warrior motto.
Oh, honor the fallen, help the living.
And that's what it's all focused on.
That's right. That's what our rides are, is we honor the fallen. Our fundraising helps the living. And it's a huge fundraiser for Wounded Warriors, and a very large public awareness campaign while we're doing it. We all pay our own way to go, and then we have a financial obligation of funds that we commit to raise.
Battlefield bike rides have been going on since when?
The first one was 2014. I believe there was not one in 2015, but since then, every year, except of course for the COVID years.
And your first one was?
2016. There's the women of the ride put together the 2016 BBR Italian, and I found it the other day. I thought, well, I'll wear that.
You wear it, and you are wearing one of your outfits.
Yes, this is the kit that we all wear. This one was from Normandy. The year that was 2019, just before COVID. And we all have matching kit. We don't wear it all the same day, but when we're at a specifically important event, like when we went to Juno Beach, we all wore the same kit on the same day. And
you mentioned that the motto is honor the fallen, and the battlefield ride, you go to different battles that Canadian soldiers were at.
Yes, we go to the battlefields. We have history lessons at every one of them. So it's not a steady ride through the day. We stop frequently, and we have memorial services. We take time to walk through the graveyards. They're immaculately kept by the Commonwealth Graves Commission. And people typically find a particular tombstone that really moves them. And there's a lot of quiet meditation that happens there. Very therapeutic for the veterans, and I think also for the police and EMS, because if it's emotional for me, then it definitely, those people who have experienced repeated traumas related to their work, it resonates with. So it's a very emotional time in the Commonwealth Graves.
And you told me before that as part of a memorial, taps are played.
Yeah, we actually have a woman from BC she comes with her bugle, and she plays taps at every memorial service. We go through the full traditional Legion style memorial service. We have on occasion had bagpipes. At Dieppe, we had some local fellows that were learning the bagpipes, and I don't think they anticipated that they were suddenly going to find themselves playing the bagpipes for 100 Canadians.
Well, and just that, both the taps and memorial, the bagpipes evokes emotions linked to November 11th, of course.
Yes, if we are, you're the slightest bit emotional, which you are on these rides, because you're tired, right? You're physically drained. They strike at the pipes or play taps. There's rarely a dry eye.
I can imagine, yes.
Yeah.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I really want to hear about how you decided to do your first trip and some of what it was like.
Thank you.
So please come back in a few moments. Welcome back to Sitting with Sally. I have with me Susan Evenden, who is a battlefield bike rider, off to Europe to do a battlefield bike ride tomorrow. And we're going to talk about your first trip, 2015. And before we do that, I understand that your grandfather, Tom Evenden, was in the Italian campaign in World War II.
Yes, he was. He was a 48th Highlander. He was a sniper, and he landed with actually Farley Mode as well, landed in Sicily, and he did from Sicily all the way up to Rimini was his service. So this in 2015, Wounded Warriors sent out an email about the battlefield bike rides, and that's the first I've heard of it. When I was a kid, Italy was not a place that we ever thought of with any kind of positive emotion. Obviously, Granddad came home from the war and he didn't like Italy, and neither did we by extension. And as soon as I got the email, I thought, I'm going to Italy, and it was, Dad had been going through a period of, I'd say, trying to understand his father. He came back from the war, an angry man who drank too much, and Dad didn't have a good relationship with him. So now, after Granddad died, Dad was seeking out making peace with Granddad. And so I decided to go and meet my Granddad, because I didn't know the man. I grew up with him, but I didn't know him. And so I decided I was going to Italy to meet Granddad and to, in some way, make peace for my dad.
It's almost a second tragedy that the men who fought came home, and instead of finding peace, the war came home with them.
Yeah, and they brought it home to their families too, and that's the PTSD component. Yes. And Dad really didn't like his dad, and consequently, we thought Granddad didn't like us,
And what you said earlier, no one talks about it because there isn't really an opening to talk about it.
No, and they don't talk about it. And what troubles me is we don't ask, and perhaps we need to learn to start asking. So we open the door. Maybe they want to talk about it.
So you're going to go 2016 on your first battlefield bike ride.
That's right. And so I thought I was fairly well prepared. I was confident. I believed I had it in the bag.
And you're a bike rider already.
Oh, yes. I've already done some long distance trips. I did not anticipate this to be too difficult. And I found that the difficulty was phenomenal. Had it not been difficult, I don't think I would have had the same cathartic moments that I had there. I'm glad it was that hard. So there was one particular climb, I call it meeting Granddad. There's a photograph of at the end of the climb, and I'm doing this climb, and I'm talking to Granddad, and I'm apologizing for being a whiner, and all that he did. I'm going up on a state-of-the-art bike. He did it with wet wool jackets and guns and kit, right? And I was struggling, and I didn't think I was going to make it. I really felt defeated. And I had this aha moment where this is the moment I met Granddad. There's a particular rider who was difficult. I didn't like being near him. He was angry. He was cantankerous. He yelled a lot. But he came up beside me on that really brutal hill, and he said, "You got this, Susan." And he stayed with me until I felt okay again. And at that moment, it was like I understood Granddad. It's that this guy, he's struggling. He's got his demons, but when it came down to it, he had my back. And so I really like Jason now. He hasn't changed. He changed me, and I'm forever grateful for that. And I felt at that moment, I understand Granddad, and I can love him for all his faults, and I can love him for all his perfections.
That's quite a awakening moment.
Yes, and I think that's the thing about these rides. You are so taken to the edge of your ability to survive that you face the things that you've been not facing. And perhaps that's why it's so cathartic for the veterans who are living with PTSD, the police officers who are living with PTSD. Yeah.
Yes, you stop stuffing all the emotions down all the time.
And it comes up really prominently.
Now, I imagine after that first bike ride, battlefield bike ride, you said never again.
I said never again.
I imagine you said that several times.
In fact, I pretty much say it every year, and Padre Phil, who's with us on every ride, he commented on that last year, is that every year I say never again, and every year I do it again.
And this one coming up is which number?
This one coming up is number 5 for me, and it's back to Italy. We're starting the trip. Some friends of mine from BC are meeting me, and we are going to Sicily. And 3 weeks into the invasion of Sicily, my grandfather's commanding officer, who was a 22-year-old young man, he made the call for Granddad to take the shot a few seconds too late. And George Whitelaw was killed, leaving no children, no one to carry on his name. and Granddad carried the burden for the rest of his life of the trauma of that moment that was quite horrific. So they're going to the grave of George Whitelaw, and then from there, we are going to head back to Italy, to the mainland Italy, and heading over to Ortona to start in Ortona and cycle up to Ravenna.
And can you go back to some of the other trips and just tell me some of the things that you remember from them?
There are so many memories. Actually, one came to me just today, and it was Italy the first time. We, quite by accident, while we were riding, came upon a group of Italian veterans outside a church having a ceremony. And they were just dissipating as we pulled up. So here these Canadians show up as they're finishing their remembrance ceremony. And this band, I had two of them, and we were an Italian elderly man who was a veteran, and I'm putting one of these on his hands, and it's a very emotional moment. Everything is emotional on these rides. Other phenomenal experience in this particular ride was Juno Beach. We were heading to Juno Beach. We had planned to meet our veteran. He was a 95-year-old gentleman, Russell Kay, who was going to walk on the beach with us. He had not been back to Juno Beach since the original landing. So we all get up early. We're on our bikes. We're riding to meet Russ at the beach.
Now you're riding on the day that the landing happened on the same
That's
day.
right. Yes, and there are ceremonies happening, and we're part of them. So we're riding, and we got stopped by security forces because Justin Trudeau was heading to Juno Beach and Donald Trump was heading to Omaha. So we're held up, and the security forces won't let us pass. And Russell told the organizers of the event at Juno Beach that he was not going onto that beach without us. He had walked on that beach in 1944 with his troops, and he was going to go on the beach again with his troops that day.
With his riders.
With his riders, and he would wait for us. And so they let us through. And we didn't make the ceremony, obviously. Time ticks on. But he waited, and we had Robert Pilon, the Phantom of the Opera, sang us a song before we went on the beach. A piper piped us, and we went on the beach with Russell Kay for his first time.
And I know the song was Bring Them Home.
Bring Him Home, yes.
And you just telling me that, I can feel the emotion.
Oh, yes. I'm holding my camera to video it, and as soon as it strikes up, my son's in the military, and the previous year, Robert had also been on a trip with us, and he had sang that song while my son was actually deployed to the Middle East. He was there for a short time. It wasn't a combat mission, but it still felt like he was so far away, and it was an incredibly moving moment. Yeah.
And on your 2016 trip, there was a Christmas dinner recreated?
Yes. 1943, Christmas 1943, the Seaforth Highlanders, their padre organized a Christmas dinner in the courtyard of a church. And they were actually advised not to go because the German troops were so entrenched in Ortona that many said it would be suicide to go to this Christmas dinner, but some did. And when we went in 2016, the Canadian War Museum organized a recreation of that particular meal, and we had Christmas dinner in the courtyard of a church. Not the same one, but they did take us later to the same courtyard.
So many memories.
Oh, yes, so many, yes.
And please come back in a few moments and we'll hear more memories from Susan. My guest today is Susan Evenden, who is a battle bike rider for Wounded Warriors. She's off on her next trip tomorrow. And Susan, I feel like you're a veteran of all the stories you have. And, we take a break and you're telling us more stories. So I'd like you to continue with some more stories, if you will.
Okay, last year was the last 100 years of World War I. And World War I was particularly tragic, just in the sheer numbers. But a couple of moments that were very meaningful. We finished the ride at a particular Commonwealth graveyard where The first soldier is buried, the very first fatality of World War I is buried, and the very last fatality. And that's not a ceremonial thing. It just happened that the battle had traveled around that region, and it started and ended with their deaths there. And that seemed so futile, although, it certainly was world-changing, World War I. It just, the futility of war, that all that time, those dead. Frequently, the ones that stand out are, there was a young 13-year-old boy, obviously a 13-year-old boy in war. How is that even possible? But children could enlist, and his job was a messenger. So he would be running messages from the trenches to and from the rear line, giving command, delivering messages, and that he was killed and is lying in a Commonwealth grave with all these men, and he's a man too, right? Yeah. He did a job that a man does.
Yes.
Yes. The Commonwealth graves are immaculately kept. They're in beautiful graveyards. They are lovingly cared for by local people. Children visit them, especially in Holland. The children of Holland go, and at Christmas, light candles at every grave. So there's so much caring for our boys, that are still over there. And largely it is young men. Yeah.
I think you said to me earlier that they have not forgotten the fallen over there, where we in Canada have more so.
I do feel that Canada, because we didn't ever really experience the combat, when you go over there, you see even the young people are very aware of what they have. They're still living with people who lived actual buildings exploding around them. When we were at Pegasus Bridge, which is D-Day, the gliders landed just west of Pegasus Bridge and were to cross the bridge and take the German-occupied area. And those crossing, of course, knew that the front were likely to not survive. But in the basement of the house, just on the east side of the bridge, was a little girl hiding in the basement. When we crossed Pegasus Bridge, that woman was in the house that is now her cafe, greeting people. So the war is still very much alive for the children growing up there today. Their grandparents lived it.
Yes, so as an older woman, she's remembering when they came when she was a little girl.
Right, and they're thanking us. Not that I did anything, but they are thanking us still. They're thanking Canada for everything we did for them.
That must be very rewarding to get that feedback too.
It is, and it does make me really want to say to Canadians, we need to honor that. We need to honor our boys the way they are honoring our boys,
So I think, Susan, what we're going to do next is go out and see you on your bicycle.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
Well, it's a lovely day, Susan.
It is, yes.
And I see of course, you're wearing one of your biking outfits.
I am, yes, yeah.
Tell me about it.
Okay, each of the kits are designed annually for the specific ride. This particular kit is for 1944, Operation Overload, which was the landing at Normandy. So Juno Beach, Omaha. And so there's a picture commemorating our soldiers. And all of us get this jersey and we wear it, and all the really special rides, we all make sure we're wearing that jersey that day.
Right. So you take several jerseys with you.
Yes, I do. Yes. Yeah. Washing is definitely a challenge. We don't have laundry facilities there, but we make it all work out okay.
I think you were telling me earlier you just soap your outfit out in the shower.
Oftentimes you walk in the shower, you soap it down, you hang it up, and you hope that it's going to be dry by the next day, or that you can pack it damp.
And you have to travel light, of course.
Very light, yes, yeah.
And I know this is quite a fancy bicycle. I was asking you, do you take it with you?
No, I don't take mine. Lots of people do. I rent while I'm there. I just don't. I get concerned about what if my bike got lost on the way there.
And how does the rent work?
The rentals are a company that rents to professional tour groups. They send a mechanic with the bikes, and so we have full support, and they're very nice bikes. Not quite as nice as my bike, but they're very nice bikes.
Well, that takes a lot of the worry off too.
It does, yes. You don't have to worry about maintenance items.
You just focus on the riding and the services.
That's right, yes, yeah.
Well, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
I very much enjoyed it.
It has been wonderful.
Best of luck, and
Thank
we're
you.
just going to let you ride away into the sunset.
Okay, thanks a lot. You have a good day.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.
Well, thank you for joining us with Sitting with Sally. I long to be riding behind Susan. Until next time.